Hello, in this video we're going to write a method in Java, and we're particularly interested in methods that don't return any values right now. So what we'd like to do is write a method that will simulate the results of rolling two fair dice by printing two random integer values in the range of 1 to 6 along with their total. And then a sample output from a call to the method could be 4 and 5, a total of 7. So we want to essentially simulate some dice. And the first thing that comes up with this question is, well, how do I introduce randomness into my program? So there's many ways to generate a random number, and I'm going to talk about two techniques in this video. The first technique is to use the math.random method. So the math class has this wonderful method called random. And the random method, for those mathematicians out there, I'll draw a little picture. It returns a value, a double value, between 0 and 1. It's actually between 0 and 1. But what's important to note is that it's inclusive of 0 and exclusive of 1. So one way to generate a random number is to take this math.random and multiply it by some value, n. So if I multiply some number between 0 and 1 by some number n, I'm going to generate a random number between that. So in our question, we want to generate a number between 1 and 6. So I'm going to multiply math.random by 6. Now that doesn't totally get me there, because again, remember, math.random gives a number between 0 and 1, but it doesn't include 1, so we'll never actually get 6. So there's two more steps in this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put brackets around this whole thing, and we're going to use a process called casting. Casting of primitive types, meaning doubles and integers, basically changes the number from one type to another. So in this case, math.random times 6 generates a double, but I want to make it an integer, so I'm going to put this notation in front of it, and essentially what this does is chops off the decimals. So now what I've done is I've generated a number between 0 and 5. But of course, dice go not from 0 from 5, they go from 1 to 6. So if I want to go from 1 to 6, I'm going to add 1 on the end. And that's one way to generate a random number. Another way that's really useful to generate a random number is to use a class called the random class, which I will actually show you in the program. It's another useful way to do this. So with that in mind, let's dive in, shall we? So this is a program I've done a couple of videos and methods in. This is printrec is one from my last video. So I'm going to first make a method header. Again, methods at this point for us always start with the modifiers public static. We don't know what they do yet, but it's good to know that those are called modifiers. The next thing we want to include is the return type. The return type is void here. And then I want the name. So the name should be descriptive. So maybe roll dice. And right now it takes no parameters because it doesn't need any information to generate a random number between 1 and 6. So I'm just going to open and close. This is the end of roll dice. Okay, so one thing that I haven't mentioned in some of my other videos, but I will mention now, is that whenever you use a method, it's always good to put a little description above it. There's formal rules to this, but in your starting, you can just write a little description about what it does. This method will generate two random numbers, display them, and display them to the screen. It will also display the total. Again, useful for someone if they want to use your method. So if I want to generate two random numbers, the first thing to do is to have somewhere to hold them. So I'm going to make an integer value called a. I can declare variables inside a method just like in the main. Remember, the main is just a special type of method that's called when you first run the program. And this is where we're going to put our command. We're going to go math.random, and we're going to multiply it by 6, and we're going to add 1. And I go int b equals same line again. Okay. Semicolon. So now what I do is I do system.out.print, print line. The numbers are, let's go and then system.out.println, the total is. Now the question is, I don't have the total, so what are we going to put in for the total? Now I'm going to show you an interesting thing here, and there's a little funny thing that happens here. So let's do a plus b like this, okay? Because the total is going to be a plus b. So if I run this now, nothing will happen because I don't have a main method. I don't have anything in my main method that calls this method. So I'm going to put here roll dice. So this line invokes it, and if I run this, I get the numbers are 5 and 6. The total is 5, 6, which doesn't make sense at all. So the question is, do you know what this is actually doing? And you can pretty quickly work out that it's just printing the two numbers next to each other. And this has to do with just the way Java interprets this line. If you wanted to actually add these two numbers in the line, you put brackets around them. So if I run this again, the numbers are 4 and 1, the total is 5. Oh, let's put a space here. That doesn't look nice. Run this again. The numbers are 1 and 6, the total is 7. And notice every time I run this, it generates different numbers. Now I mentioned there is a second way to generate random numbers in Java, and I'm going to show you how to do that quickly. So for now, I'm just going to comment these out briefly. We're going to do this again. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create, kind of like we make a, for those of you who have taken input, you create this thing called a scanner object. We're going to make a random object. So this is when we start getting to objects in classes. At this point, you probably don't know what they are fully, but objects, you can think of them as having a bunch of tools we can take advantage of that do things for us. So notice here, you'll get an error because random isn't in the actual standard library. So when you write a Java program, there's standard tools that are given to you, standard classes that are given to you. But it doesn't give you all of them. Random is the one you have to actually import, is one of the ones you have to import. So if I come up here now, I see there it is. So this random method, this random object, if I go r dot, I get a list of all the methods that are associated with it. These are all the tools that are associated with this random class. And you notice there's this nice one called nextInt. And so I click on it, come over here. It returns a pseudo, it's a long description here I won't read. The key thing to understand is, remember, this is a method. Here's the name, nextInt. It needs to take an integer called an n, and it returns an int. So it has to be whatever, we have to set it equal to an integer so we can put that return value in there. Now you'll notice here it doesn't have the word static, but we won't get into why it's missing that modifier. So I'm going to go nextInt. I do recommend you get comfortable with reading through the methods. You'll never memorize every method out there, but good programmers are people that can go out and find the method that they need. So I'm going to double click, and I want a number between 1 and 6. So I put a 6 there, and of course I need A, and then I need to do thing for B. And this is probably one of the easier ways to generate a random number. Now if we run this, we see we get 4 and 4, 3 and 5, 5 and 2, 3 and 1. Uh-oh, we get 2 and 0. So this is where if we do more of a read about this, we'll see that it returns from 0 up to the number, and we see here exclusive. So again, if I want 1 to 6, I just add 1 to the end. 1 to the end. There we go. So now we get random numbers generated pretty consistently. Now, I'm going to make one last modification to this. Pretend you like to play Dungeons and Dragons, and of course we know Dungeons and Dragons has the wonderful 12-sided die. Well, I could make the modification to this program and simply put a 12 here. But say you play a different game that has a 3-sided die or a 6-sided die. Maybe we want to specify what the number of sides are. To do this, we can actually introduce a parameter to this method. So if I do this, int n, so now it takes this n, and instead of generating a random number between up to 12, I'm going to go up to n. And what this now does is makes this the random number that it generates. But of course, when I invoke the method here, I need to pass it something. So if I put a 12 there, this will generate random numbers between 1 and 12. And sure enough, there it is. But if I put 100 in here, there you go. So there's lots of great information in this video. If you have any questions, always please feel free to ask, and have a wonderful day.